Assalamu alaikum. Today we will discuss the concept of the divine singularity. Welcome to this explainer. We're about to embark on a really fascinating philosophical journey, asking a profoundly deep question. If a transcendent creator exists, why must there be strictly only one? Why not multiple? Together, we're going to dive into the rigorous logic, the mathematics of reality, and the elegant reasoning that points inescapably to a singular, unified origin of our universe. We'll move beyond simple assumptions and really apply critical thinking to understand the very foundation of existence. Let's map out our intellectual journey for today. We'll cover 6 key areas. First, the two kings paradox. Second, the logic of differentiation. Third, the battle of wills. Fourth, Occam's razor applied. Fifth, the need for revelation. And finally, unity and human conscience. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The Two Kings Paradox. This is a thought experiment on Sfinga. So I want you to imagine you're an explorer, and you've just landed on a distant, fictional planet called Sfinga. You step off your ship and find yourself in this massive, borderless country. But here's the catch. Your local guide insists that there are actually 2 identical countries exactly where you're standing. Later on, you're chatting with local officials who are proudly praising the 2 kings of this land. You naturally have to ask, well, how can a society function with 2 kings? How do you maintain harmony in your laws, prevent civil war, and just keep order? The official replies, oh, well, they always agree. Their wills are exactly one. And right there lies our paradox. Think about it. If their laws are in complete harmony and they act with a single, perfectly aligned will, governing the exact same territory, are there actually 2 kings at all? Or is it simply one unified will governing everything, just operating under 2 different titles? That leads us perfectly into Section 2, the logic of differentiation, looking at how multiplicity requires difference. Let's unpack the first philosophical concept logically derived from our paradox. Consider 2 identical conceptual spheres. Let's call them creator X and creator Y. Now, if we establish that both are completely all-powerful, all-wise, infinite, and identical in absolutely every single ontological aspect, there is literally 0 differentiation between them. Even identical human twins are differentiated by occupying different physical spaces at different times, right? But a transcendent being, by definition, doesn't have physical boundaries or spatial limitations. So if whatever is true of creator X is identically and infinitely true of creator Y, those conceptual spheres perfectly overlap. You haven't actually described 2 separate beings at all. You've just described the exact same singular being twice. Multiplicity demands a distinguishing feature, and infinite perfection just leaves no room for differences. Moving on to Section 3, the battle of wills. Here, we'll examine the argument from exclusion. We just looked at perfectly identical wills, but what happens if we apply this exact same logic to multiple independent, competing forces trying to influence the same object? Imagine a scenario where 2 creators attempt to move a single rock in different directions. Logically, we really only have 3 possible outcomes here. Step 1, one creator overpowers the other. That means only one is truly supreme, rendering the other weak, and therefore not a true creator at all. Okay, step 2, they apply equal force and cancel each other out, meaning the rock goes nowhere. But when applied to our universe, this is impossible, because reality and creation clearly do exist. They weren't canceled out into nothingness. That leaves step 3, they perfectly agree and move it together. And as we've already established, if they perfectly agree and act seamlessly, they're basically functioning as one will, which brings us right back to a single, unified origin. The brilliant 12th century philosopher Ibn Rushd, also widely known as Averroes, formalized this concept beautifully. He concluded that 2 unyielding, absolute wills managing the exact same reality would result in absolute chaos. The reality, or the substratum, would be corrupted necessarily. And think about it. If there were multiple competing supreme wills, the very fabric of our universe, the laws of physics themselves, would literally tear apart under the strain of contradictory commands. Yet, when we look up at the stars or down through a microscope, we absolutely do not see chaos. We observe profound, elegant mathematical order and finely tuned physical laws, pointing strongly and exclusively to a single, unimpeded architect. Let's look at Section 4, Occam's razor applied. We'll be focusing on simplicity and comprehensiveness. We can examine the singularity logically through a really famous 14th century philosophical principle that is still foundational in science today. Occam's razor teaches us that plurality should not be posited without necessity. Or in plain academic terms, The simplest and most comprehensive explanation is usually the correct one. Positing multiple eternal beings to explain our universe is totally unnecessary. In fact, doing so severely weakens our logical framework because it introduces a whole host of unanswerable questions. Like, how do they share power? What are their specific domains? Who decides the laws of physics? The absolute simplest, most elegant, and most comprehensive explanation for a unified, coherent universe is a single, unified power. Multiplying causes beyond necessity kind of just creates confusion. Now, a common objection to this is to say, well, hold on, complex things like the pyramids required thousands of human builders, so shouldn't a vastly complex universe require multiple creators? That's a classic philosophical category error. Notice the really critical difference in scale and nature here. Complex human structures require many limited hands because, well, humans get tired, we have steep physical limits. In philosophical terms, we are limited, efficient causes. But an entire universe requires an infinite, unlimited cause, because an infinite cause lacks absolutely nothing. It has no boundaries on its power or knowledge. It doesn't need any assistance. One infinite being is completely sufficient to actualize any level of complexity. Section 5. The need for revelation, moving from logic to epistemology. So far, we've established a mathematical and philosophical singularity, but how do we transition from abstract reasoning to actually discovering the specific nature of this entity? How do we cross the bridge from knowing that a singularity exists to knowing what it is? Realistically, there are only two potential epistemological methods for this kind of discovery: internal introspection or external communication. Relying purely on internal introspection is kind of like a mouse trying to conceptualize the vastness of a galaxy. It's simply beyond its hardware. We humans are incredibly variable in our genetics, our cultures, our biases, and our cognitive capacities. Therefore, objective truth about the infinite cannot just be guessed through mere meditation. It has to arrive via objective external communication. If the creator wants to be known in detail, the creator has to be the one to initiate the dialogue. And human history proves this limitation perfectly. Did you know that relying purely on human introspection has led to roughly 3,700 different, highly subjective names and concepts for God recorded in human history since 6000 BCE? When thousands of humans try to paint the infinite using only their internal imaginations and cultural biases, the inevitable result is thousands of contradictory pictures. We just end up creating deities in our own image rather than discovering the actual reality of the singularity. The knowledge of a creator's existence is a lot like hearing a loud knock at your front door. You can logically assume someone is standing there, but you only know who is knocking if they speak to you through the door. We can only know the creator through an external announcement. But as critical thinkers, we obviously can't accept just any claim. To be trusted, this communication has to pass some pretty rigorous tests. First, it must be logically sound and completely consistent with the rational conclusions we just discussed. Second, it must be internally and externally consistent, totally devoid of contradictions. And finally, it must possess clear signposts of its transcendent origin, evidence that simply cannot be explained away naturally. This brings us to our final point, Section 6, Unity and Human Conscience, focusing on the ethical implications. It is so important that we ground these lofty philosophical heights into actionable, everyday human ethics. What does the reality of a divine singularity actually mean for how you and I live our lives? While the ethical implications are beautifully profound, if we are the result of a single imposing will, a singular, deliberate origin, it logically follows that we absolutely must view humanity not through abstracted, artificial divisions like race, geopolitical borders, or economic class. We have to view ourselves as a deeply unified family. The singularity of our origin essentially strips away our superficial differences and binds us all together at the very fundamental level of existence. We share the exact same source, which means human dignity is universal and completely non-negotiable. This profound cosmic unity inherently demands earthly compassion. There's a profound teaching that captures this essence perfectly. Those who are merciful will be shown mercy by the most merciful. Be merciful to those on the earth, and the one in the heavens will have mercy upon you. You see, when we genuinely recognize our shared, singular origin, extending mercy to our fellow human beings, and really to nature itself, isn't just a nice societal suggestion anymore. It actually becomes the only logical, ethical, and coherent way to live. The singular architect is merciful, therefore the creation must reflect that mercy. So the crucial point I want you to take away today is that the divine singularity is far more than just an abstract mathematical or philosophical argument meant for a textbook. It is the very foundation that shapes our physical existence, our logic, and our shared humanity. As you go about your day, I really want you to think about how this incredible unity challenges you to view the strangers you pass on the street. If we share a single deliberate origin, how should that permanently change the way we treat one another? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me. See you in the next session.